Hello. Now, if you remember, in the last audio we talked about David Jones's start on the North Western Railway. Well, today we continue his story in 1965. I won't reveal too much, but let's say he gets an encounter with a certain pair of yellow twins, finally meets the Farquhar engines properly for the first time, and is introduced to a new shunter. All that to come in our second story for the David Jones audio series. The David Jones audio series, Series 1, Story 2, The Tale Continues. Thomas audio drama, written and told by Grace R.J. Long. Intro theme by Peter Miles. Since figuring out his name, David Jones had his name painted onto his wheel arch. Everything ran smoothly, and he proved to be popular with the passengers. He alone proved a fabulous example of a profitable engine. His sweetness and kindness really brought his whole personality together, with his clumsy mistakes when it came to names. I must say though, he must have had the most frightening time of his life when he met the Claypit twins, Bill and Ben. They loved to play tricks, and one day when he was at the harbour on the Brendan branch, he was filling up on coal and water, and the twins decided it would be the perfect time to make a prank while the coaches were empty.
"Let's hide his coaches in the sidings, with the other goods rather empty,"
said Bill.
"Oh, yes,"
jeered Ben, before he was shushed down by Bill. And not too soon after they hid David's coaches. When he returned to the platform, he was in terror. "Where's my coaches?" he shouted. Bill and Ben, who were inside, giggled. "I have an inspector coming, and I need my coaches." David Jones panicked. Bill and Ben's laughter turned into fright. David Jones noticed a halt in the laughter, and looked over to the twins. His eyes were full of fury and anger. Benny, did you have something to do with this?" David Jones shouted. This made Bill and Ben shut up and quiver in fear.
"No," they shaked.
"You hid my coaches, didn't you? You put them somewhere. You hid my coaches, didn't you? You put them somewhere when you shouldn't have," David Jones boomed. Bill and Ben started to squeak in fear. "Now you two will go out to the yard and bring them back to the station platform before the inspector gets here, or you will be in big trouble, young men," David Jones finished at last, and Bill and Ben brought up the courage to speak.
"Yes, David Jones,"
they quietly said, and steamed out of the shed and into the yard. They looked up and down the sidings for David Jones' coaches, but couldn't find them. They then came up to a siding.
"Ben, didn't we put the coaches here?"
Bill asked. "I think we did," Ben replied.
"Then where's the coaches?"
Bill asked, now getting upset and desperate.
"I don't know,"
Ben replied. He was about to break into tears. David Jones pulled up in between them. "Have you found them?" he asked.
"No,"
Ben said, his tears finally breaking.
"We're sorry,"
Bill said, him too breaking into tears. "David Jones, is that you?" came a voice. "Oh, there they are," David Jones said. The switches set, and he coupled up to some vans. He pulled them back, and there stood David Jones's coaches. "These horrid twins shunted us with the vans for fun," they complained. Davy Jones set the vans onto an empty siding before returning.
"What?"
asked Bill.
"We thought you were taken away,"
Ben said. "Taken? Puh! No, we weren't. You just woke us up from your slumber with your crying," the coaches said. "Is there an issue?" said a voice. It was Boko, a diesel from the mainland that now works on Edward's branch line. No issue at all," David Jones beamed. "I'm sorry about your coaches, David. I thought they were off duty, so I shunted my train in front of them," Boko explained. "No issue at all. Now I just have to hope I can get them to the platform and turn around before the inspector arrives," David Jones said before coupling up to the coaches and returning to the platform and turning around. Thankfully, he finished just in time, and the inspector was a complete success. Bill and Ben didn't prank for weeks after that. Our next story follows David's encounter with the Farquhar engines. Daisy had been refusing to do work as the Fat Controller was requesting her to start bringing coaches due to it being the summer. David's stopping train was considered not as necessary as it ran on the main line, so his traffic was diverted to other mainline trains and was sent to the Farquhar branch line to do Daisy's work. However, when he arrived at the carriage shed with some branch line coaches and saw Daisy, the rail cars had pulled.
"Yuck!"
she yelled in horror.
"So this is the rubbish they sent to do my work? Absolutely disgraceful."
She looked away in disgust. "Modern diesels," David Jones muttered. "Perhaps instead of using my branch line coaches, I should take you out instead." That stopped Daisy in her tracks. Her shock returned her disgusted gaze back to him.
No, I'll be a good diesel. I can't be seen being used as cargo, and that would be unsuitable for my springs and unacceptable for my swerves, and would ruin my reputation as the latest passenger model," Daisy excused.
Davy Jones smiled. "That's what I thought." Toby pulled in with Henrietta and some trucks. He heard Daisy's panic as he arrived. "You can challenge Daisy like that?" Toby said.
"Well done,"
finished Henrietta. "I'm pleased to say David Jones did Daisy's work wonderfully, and being the last surviving member of his class, drew even more people to the line, much to Daisy's jealousy. Unfortunately though, Toby ran sick one morning. David Jones was asleep, and Percy and Thomas were discussing with their drivers who would take his train, which eventually woke up David Jones. "Some of us are trying to have a morning doze here," he interrupted before closing his eyes and enjoying the morning sun. "Well, you can't both take all these loads," Percy's driver said. David Jones interrupted again. "Percy has to run to the quarry anyway. Allow him to take Henrietta and the trucks, and he can drop off the workers and do Toby's job as well." Now Percy had support for his point, but Thomas was still adamant to win. "But my work is getting overloaded. I need another coach," he argued. David Jones slightly opened his eyes and glanced over. "Then take Jeremy. She has been jealous of me, and I've heard her complaining about coming out," David Jones said. Almost as if she was waiting to hear that, Daisy sprung awake.
"Excuse me, I am Daisy, and I want to come out to take passengers, not to be an extra coach," Daisy protested.
"Well, we don't have much of a choice, and we won't have time to get another coach," Thomas's driver said. Daisy gave a big sigh.
Ugh.
As the two tank engines fetched their loads, Percy with his and Toby's loads, and Thomas with his coaches and Daisy. "Goodbye, Henrietta," Toby said.
"Goodbye, dear,"
Henrietta optimistically replied. Davy Jones eventually had his spoiler heated and was off. It took a few days to fix the problem with Toby, so this routine continued. Once Toby was prepared, though, Daisy had it. In the morning, Daisy was awake before anyone else and shouted out her opinion as if it was an announcement. "I will go out today and pull the coaches," she said in disdain and loss of dignity before continuing. "I've been disgraced by being seen on a passenger train. It won't get better." Surprisingly, she stayed true to her words and pulled the train. It remained like this for the remainder of the summer, and Davy Jones returned. He left an impression on the Farquhar crew like no other. They found him to be of great help, as well as someone who had many entertaining stories to tell, which he would usually tell to the big engines at Teignmouth. He returned to his stopping train and his diverted traffic was diverted back to his train. Now we come to our last story, the new shunter. It was a beautiful morning, and David Jones had been prepared for his everyday routine. He steamed into the yard, and there stood a small dark blue tank engine with two side tanks sitting beside his boiler on his running board. Davy Jones steamed up beside the engine. "Hello there, little one," he greeted. "Oh, hello, I'm Joan. Who are you?" the tank engine stuttered. "I'm Davy Jones. It is good to meet you, Johnny," Davy Jones told the engine, a friendly smile across his face. Joan was confused. "My name's Joe, not Johnny," he corrected. "That is what I said. I see that you are new here. Perhaps we can get you to do some work." David Jones flicked his eyes over to some coaches down the line. "Do you see those coaches?" he asked. Joan looked straight ahead. "Yes, I do," he said. "Fetch those and bring them to me. I will be waiting at my platform," said David Jones before steaming off. "Right on it, Dave Johnny," said Joan cheekily before collecting the coaches. As Joan pulled up beside David Jones, he noticed David was starting to fall asleep. As he steamed past behind him, he blew his whistle to wake him up. "Ah! Who did that?" David Jones queried. "You were falling asleep. You do have a train to take, so I woke you up," Jones said. His voice faded as he went further back to a set of switches before shunting the coaches behind David Jones. David Jones gave a tired sneer. If any older engines were nearby, they'd understand his grumpiness. The naivety of some of the young engines often proved to be an annoyance, and often required patience. Patience that was a struggle to always withhold at all times. Joan just saw David's grunt as annoyance towards him being young, to which he just brushed off and kept a beaming smile across his face. Jones teamed up alongside David Jones. "So, any advice for shunting?" Joan asked. "Don't bump the coaches. Only bump the trucks if they misbehave, and try your best to make sure they don't mess with you. You usually gain this by gaining their respect or showing how experienced you are. If you're experienced enough, they will leave you alone," David Jones told him. His eyes were still heavy. "All right, thank you," Jones said before rushing off to arrange some more trains. David Jones took his train and returned to the shed, very tired. He was just about to fall asleep when Joan rushed in. "Thank you for your advice. I was able to do well on taking care of the trucks today, and the coaches said I was very gentle with them." David Jones grunted. If he had a pillow, he would face-plant into it. "That is nice to hear. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get to sleep," David Jones said, still on the brink of falling asleep. "Oh, right, yes, of course," Jones said. David Jones smiled before shutting his eyes. A moment of silence erupted, before Joan broke the silence. "Oh, Gordon also started picking on me. Do you know how I could prove to him that I'm not just a, and I quote, useless shunting locomotive?" Davy Jones remained silent and squeezed his eyelids shut. He knew Joan was just young at heart, but he couldn't spend all night talking to him, especially since he had been tired all day and was finally looking forward to some sleep. Joan continued to talk and talk and talk for half of the night before going to sleep. Davy Jones only got an hour of sleep, and that was towards the end of the night. The next morning Joan was as bright as he could be as he sped out the sheds. Meanwhile Davy Jones, still tired and barely awake, had trouble starting up. His fire just couldn't build up, but he eventually did, and he very slowly, and as if he was nauseous, steamed out of the shed. He arrived at the yard and saw Gordon alongside Joan. "No, it is those coaches that are mine," Gordon said as he spectated Joan trying to find his coaches. "Which ones are they again?" Joan asked. Gordon gave an annoying sigh. David Jones steamed up beside Gordon. "What trouble is he causing now, Gordon?" David Jones said. "I'd expect you to not be so moody towards someone like him," Gordon said, almost in surprise at David Jones's wording. It's clear David Jones wasn't teasing by the tone of his voice. "Well," Gordon started after a quick moment of silence, "he cannot figure out that my coaches are the ones on the right, despite me telling him multiple times that it is those coaches specifically," Gordon said. "Perhaps he is blind," David Jones said. "I thought that too, but then when I asked him to describe everything he saw in the yard, he described everything perfectly." Gordon was clearly annoyed. "Is it these coaches, Gordon?" Joan asked. "No, all the way to the right," Gordon shouted back at Joan. Joan moved down a few sidings to the right. "These ones?" Joan asked. "He must be doing this on purpose," Gordon muttered under his breath. "No, on the far right, all the way to the right." Gordon's annoyance only grew. Joan moved down another few sidings to the left. Gordon gave a grunt of annoyance. "If he can't do it right, then perhaps I can." Gordon steamed off towards the siding with his coaches and coupled up. As he steamed out of the siding, all he saw and heard was Joan laughing hysterically. David Jones, who just sat watching, was greatly disappointed in Joan's methods to humble Gordon, knowing there were better methods. David Jones, rather than not risk having the same situation Gordon was in, also collected his own coaches. When David Jones strutted his coaches into his platform, he saw Gordon rushing to the front of the train. He looked at the clock and saw Gordon was running late, an unusual thing for him, clearly caused by Jones's prank. David Jones then rushed to the front of the train, running late himself. Passengers were flooding the coaches for both engines due to their late arrivals to the station. David Jones accidentally slammed into his coaches, causing a little bit of delay. "Oh, to the end with you, Johnny," David Jones muttered under his breath. Jones's naivety continued to plague David Jones for a few weeks, almost getting the Tismouth to Brentham line shut down. The Fat Controller came up to David one morning to talk to him. "David Jones, recently you have been running late with your trains. The Tismouth to Brentham line is now going under. Is there a reason you've been running late?" the Fat Controller asked. David Jones's eyes had started to go black from tiredness and struggled to keep his eyes open. "I'm sorry, sire. It is Johnny. All his questions to me have been keeping me awake at night. I've only been getting an hour of sleep. I just need a break from him asking me for advice all the time," David Jones explained. "Could you specify who Johnny is?" the Fat Controller asked. "Your new shunter for Tidmouth Yard," David Jones said. "He has also been purposely not doing his job to humble the larger engines." The Fat Controller raised his hand to his mouth. "I see. And I shall speak to Joan and see if what you have said is true." The Fat Controller left to meet up with Joan. As the Fat Controller explained Davy Jones's words to him, Joan grew guilty. He had not realised how much of an effect he was having on David Jones. He said he would reduce his queries towards him, and that sorted out David Jones' problems. At night, he had a full sleep, and the income for the Tidmouth to Brentham line started to increase back to normal again, with David Jones' sleep schedule fixed. And with that, David Jones' second outing in these stories comes to an end. We have one more collection of stories this season. Those last stories will involve some old friends of David Jones, David Jones's loneliness, and some new diesels arriving on the railway. And lastly, a turn in Sodor's history, possibly for the worst. But that's a story for another time. Night night. You have been listening to the David Jones audio series. Series 1, Story 2, The Tale Continues. A Thomas audio drama written by Great RJ1. David Jones is created by Great RJ1. If you wish to use the character in your own content, please leave a comment below and we can sort out some negotiations. The character of Joan is created by Great RJ1. If you wish to use the character in your own content, please leave a comment below and we can sort out some negotiations. The music is by Peter Miles. Thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.